Welcome to the Gentleman's Guide to the Accursed. You know, there's old and there's ancient. And then there's even older than that. That's the Raptors, the primordial of the primal. Their scales tell the tale of epochs. They are ancient, yet these sleeping dragons deign to wake and walk among us. We should feel blessed by the Raptor's presence. They are mythical, yet they exist. What a fine way to summarize the accursed. These feathered serpents, at the very least. Oh, and they've heard every Jurassic Park joke there is, so don't call one a clever girl unless you want your face ripped from your skull. Feathered serpents, then. You know, I have heard from more than one source that the Raptors can trace their family back to the rainforests and mountains of South America, to the Mayan civilization, maybe even before that, because apparently there are pictographs, there are sculptures that resemble many of the wild forms that you see the Raptors adopting. They want to claim primacy, you see, so the Raptors' history is incredibly important to them. They want legacy, they want legend, and being able to assign their past to a specific period deep in history is very important to this family. It's what sets them in contrast to, for example, the Hydes, a family that they cannot stand. Oh, I can't speak for every individual Raptor, but on a family level, the Raptors and the Hydes could not be more like oil and water. The Raptors are all about sanctuary, hunkering down and keeping your hoard, your treasure, tightly gripped in your claws in a place where you can trust and only you can access. The Hydes, on the other hand, are explosive, incendiary. They wish to breach the walls of these vaults and share all the treasures within, so they claim, with all the other accursed in the world. The Raptors are very much against this. They believe there are some truths, some secrets other accursed are not meant to know. The Hydes don't harbour such ideas. But for the time being, the Raptors have the right of it, or at least they claim it, and the vast majority of Primal, at the very least, respect them for that. It again ties into that idea of age, of legacy, of them having not only the fortitude, but also generation upon generation of mandate to hold on to all of the secrets that afflict us. I'll get back onto that. You know, Feathered Serpents is a neat way to summarize the Raptors. They are equally reptile and avian. I say that. I know some who are more serpentine than another, and others who are more bird-like. For example, I knew one Raptor, Matilda, her name was, who in her wild form resembled a great griffin. Can you imagine? The only reptilian feature to her, and as with most griffins, she had the seemingly mammalian lion-like body, leonine, I think the word is. The only reptilian features she possessed were her eyes. Her irises were positively snake-like, and she had a forked tongue that would occasionally protrude from that beak of hers. She was a fine woman. A true terror, don't get me wrong, until she vanished in a Hyde-related incident. So yes, these families, they do test each other. You know, the Hydes were busy sabotaging Raptor plans, their dens, their clutches, their sanctuaries, long before the Hydes were accepted as one of the families of the Primal. And even now that they have been, they're a little more polite about it, but still they peck at the edges of Raptor control. You see, the Raptors believe, and I think there's a reason to believe this, that they hold the secrets of damnation. That they understand curses better than any other family, not just the Primal, but any other family across every lineage. That they know what forms a damnation, and with it, they know the careful magics that are required to alleviate said curses. Now, were such information to unfold, the magic would be lost, and so they keep it safe, they keep it secure, they keep it to themselves. And The Hides, they resent this. I mentioned earlier, they want to spread that information wide, let everyone have technology. Everyone has a gun. Put it in your hand. You can, I hope, imagine that there are opposing schools of thought here. I mentioned the Maya. Let's return to that. You know, there are few primal families so caught up in ritual and history as the Raptors. They're secret family gatherings, I'm told. They dress themselves in quite ostentatious fashion, without taking their wild form. They listen to the creature, but they do not shift their form. And so they wear the hundreds of feathers of gorgeous birds in their hair, and they wear the scales of alligators and crocodiles. I can never remember the difference. And they play the part of gods, some Quetzalcoatl kind of creature. And in exchange for blessings of pure water, gifts of gold and cacao, they will alleviate the torments of their kin, and even relieve the damnation of one chosen guest at this gathering. It's true, this has actually happened, though, of course, that kind of magic is the purview of some very old and powerful raptors. But it's one of those aspects that garners respect. They are less concerned about short-term troubles and more interested in long-term fixes. And they don't believe, so they claim, that such fixes can be rolled out en masse across all damned. You see, they understand the flow and the weave of curses. And it isn't just an arrogant claim. They do. And it's the eldest among them who have the power to remove curses entirely. I have only seen it done once, but I have seen it done. So that implies something. Those worms, so-called, at the top of the family tree, they are paranoid in the protection of these secrets. Violent to any who they deem a threat to the Raptor family. This might all be tolerable, even acceptable, if the Raptors weren't such duplicitous and capricious fucks. They like to act the part of stoic lizards, watching patiently and allowing people to make their own mistakes, but they play favourites. They are subject to bribes, and if they can see a way to elevate themselves or their family in their actions, then they'll do what snakes do, and they will lunge at a target without warning, without pause, without compassion. It's better, they argue, to remove a threat and learn to mourn later than make a mistake, leave that threat alive, and have to live with the consequences. Duplicity is in their nature. They act as if they are better than other primal, but it's the source of their original curse. Perhaps it is not their choice that they should be so enwrapped in lies. Do you remember the story I told you about, the Get of Lyca's genesis? The woman, her children, and the cruel landowner who subjected her to all kinds of pains? Well, see how you feel about this story of the Raptor's origin. You see, the first of the Raptors was a prince. No humble woman was he. No, he was a prince, powerful. He had a tongue of silver, a smile of purest gold. His eyes twinkled like emeralds and sapphires, a rarity in a land where most eyes were brown, and his only defect, for otherwise, physically, he was a specimen. This prince could charm anyone and convince anyone of anything. He was an adequate warlord, but not magnificent. He was an average lover, but no one to write home about, more concerned with satisfying himself than his partners. He was capable of language, of understanding scripture, but he was no scholar or priest. But he convinced everyone else that he was all of these things. A well-placed lie here, a daring tale there, and his warriors' battles were victorious because of his deeds alone. He had bedded 1,000 of the enemies once they were enslaved, and his actions in the bed resulted in their revering him, worshipping only his name. He was the prince that the gods spoke to personally because he was so wise. They had a direct communion with his ear, with his mind. That is what he claimed, and he was so convincing that everyone believed him. And so, ultimately, you tell enough lies, and as we know in the world, there are certain people who will come to see that as truth. So it was with the Prince of Lies, the original Raptor. He had no need for a spiritual medium to speak to the heavens. He was a direct conduit to the gods. His prowess at inflating his own title, this Prince of Lies, was so grand as to even fool the gods. He fell ill one winter, and it was on his sickbed that he was visited by envoys of all of the gods. Everyone from the heavens and the underworld came to his side because he was worshipped as a mortal, almost a living god, you could say. And they wished to congratulate him on a life well lived, these envoys, but they also wished something else. He was such a grand figure, this father of raptors. They all wanted him to replace the god they served. Now, I'd like to tangent a little from this story for a moment to wonder if there is any truth in this. Who do we think these envoys were? Do we think they were outcasts? Were they serving archons? Maybe even fae? Maybe they were something else entirely. Something to consider anyway. But they all beseeched this Prince of Lies, not knowing him for a liar, and said, "We wish for you to supplant the god that overbears me. We wish for you to take this god who has become lax in their duties and lead a better heaven." Now, had the Prince of Lies been a truly wise man, he would have aimed his sights at a god of deception, of duplicity, such as himself, of charm, of carousing, of enjoyment, but no. Because this is the thing with liars, especially accomplished ones. They can end up believing much of the story they tell. Tell a story enough times, it becomes the truth, even to the teller. So he had misled himself. He believed he was an accomplished warrior. He believed he was a superlative lover. He believed he was a direct channel to the gods. And so he challenged the god of war. It was a sad sight, and his weakness was swiftly revealed. Nevertheless, so confident was he that he then went on to challenge the god of knowledge and wisdom. He was brought low again, belittled, his lack of intellects highlighted for all to see. He was shown to be an imbecile in comparison to the divinities, but not to be bowed, not to be broken. He challenged the gods of love and fertility. He said that he would seduce each of them in turn. They mocked him. Their laughter at his prowess, as well, let's call it what it was, half-cocked, as it happened to be, it stuck with him. It said it sticks with him even now. The gods found this wretch amusing, but more than that, they found him pitiful. And so they cursed him, as gods are wont to do. Into a feathered serpent was he transformed, neither one thing nor the other, beautiful yet deadly, not whole, never whole, stunning and radiant yet cold inside, aggressive yet flighty. This Prince of Lies had found his perfect form. Now, I mentioned the Get of Laika earlier, and you may be wondering, how does this story tie to the other? Do not all lineages stem from the same source? Well, if stories are to be believed, and this story isn't one spread by the Raptors or the Lycans, but it is one I've heard more than once. You remember the woman and her children. She didn't have enough food. She didn't have enough livestock. She didn't have enough coin to keep the roof over her head, and so she was subject to the terrors of a hungry who demanded things of her. How did she end up that way? Well, in the stories, her land was once bountiful, until a warlord, half-begotten, with a stream of lizard-like warriors in his wake, serpents and birds, had ravaged the land like a horde, stripping it of everything of value. And that is what left her in the state where she had to fall on the mercies of a cruel man. But that wasn't it. That wasn't the only thing. That wasn't the only connection. Because there are raiders throughout time. What is to connect this to our Prince of Lies? Well, according to the story, before he departed her land after taking everything it was that he wanted, he gave her the words, "We are not your tormentors," he said. "To hate us is to hate the seasons, and just as seasons change, we will pass on. Save your anger, let it fester, and direct it at the monster that keeps you shackled to poverty, fear, and want." How like our Prince of Lies, to take no responsibility for the horrors he wrought upon this woman and her family. And, let us assume, the thousands of people in the lands around her. Do you think he ever took responsibility? Maybe that's what the Raptors do now. Maybe that is why the Raptors feel it is ultimately their place to take responsibility for the other Primal, to take responsibility for secrets and curses, because they know that they have dropped the proverbial ball on many an occasion in the past. Do not mistake me, the Raptors are vicious beasts. As with all Primal, they are terrifying monsters capable of spells and incantations to twist the elements and wield the mutating form like a weapon. But beneath all of that, they are thinkers. They watch and they plan. They may not be the best at doing so, but they hold themselves closer to the immortal families of other accursed than they do the corrosive Sphinx or firebrand hides. They know they have time. And if time is on your side, the truth is whatever it is whatever story they decide to tell.